Carbide was purchased by Dow Chemical, which is a conglomerate. And in 2004, it was the 20-year anniversary of the Bhopal disaster. So what the Yes Men did was they created a website that looked just like Dow Chemical's corporate website. And it had a very similar URL. It was something that if you weren't paying attention, you could end up on. So remember when I always say, like, check your sources? Make sure that you're at a reputable website. What happened was the BBC didn't check their sources. They didn't make sure that they were at a reputable website. They contacted the Yes Men instead of Dow Chemical for an interview. So they thought they were contacting Dow Chemical. So the Yes Men went on the BBC, pretending to be spokesmen from Dow Chemical. And I will show you a video of what happened.
20 years, yeah, really. Like, I think I used to do it this way.
This is Andy.
Right.
One.
Oh, God. Oh, God. When we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and today we are prepared to do
He's practicing for the interview that he's about to do. That's why he's nervous.
Don't tell too much when we get there, I think.
Gather a lot of attention.
And you're watching BBC World, our main headlines. The world's worst industrial accident is being remembered in India today. It's 20 years since deadly gas leaked from the Union Carbide chemical plant in the city of Bhopal. At least 18,000 deaths over 26 weeks. Many local people say the contamination has never been properly cleared up.
Yeah. Should I typically just look right into the camera? Okay.
The factory still exists here, and that's been a real problem for people living here locally. I mean, there's a site, I've been to it, and it's full of toxic waste. People who are living in these houses, they've all got a story to tell about that day 20 years ago. Many of them lost members of their family, and they say that they're continuing to suffer because of the tragedy. And they're saying somebody needs to answer for this. Legally, what they're saying is they want to pursue the company to try and clean up the site, but whether the company will accept liability seems doubtful.
Well, joining us live from Paris now is Jude Finisterra. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemicals, which took over Union Carbide. Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to adequately compensate the victims.
Jude, that's good news that you have finally accepted responsibility. Some people would say too late. It's 3 years, almost 4 years on.
When we acquired Union Carbide, we did settle their liabilities in the United States immediately. And we are now, 3 years later, prepared to do the same in India. We should have done it 3 years ago. We are doing it now. And I would also like to say that this is no small matter, Steve. This is the first time in history that a publicly owned company of anything near the size of Dow has performed an action which is significantly against its bottom line simply because it's the right thing to do.
All right, I'm going to pause it there. So why would this be really significant? I mean, obviously he's not from Dow Chemical, and he doesn't have the authority to do this.
He's drawing attention to the company itself and addressing the issue.
Yeah, so he's drawing attention. Exactly. So the issue is already on the radar because of the 20-year anniversary, and he's drawing attention to the fact that Dow Chemical is intimately connected to Union Carbide and to these victims.
also promising money to people that's not his. He doesn't have this money. He's promising money to people who are going to expect compensation, and they're going to fight for it now because they've been promised this money.
Yeah, and they have been, absolutely, and they had been fighting for it for years, and no one was, I mean, no one from the company, no one from Union Carbide or later Dow Chemical was listening. So by doing this, absolutely, I mean, it re-energizes the debate. Can you foresee any potential problems with this strategy? Do you think there will be consequences? Yes. How do you imagine Dow Chemical reacts to something like this?
They probably just looked at, like, someone from the company probably just saw this newscast and was like, who is this guy? What money is he giving away?
Holy shit.
Yeah, like, uh-oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what the repercussions would be, but I can imagine not very good for the S.
Yeah, I would say
Or
probably.
BBC, really.
Yeah, the last thing you would expect is for Dow Chemical to be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll just do that. You know, odds are that's not going to happen.
Well, it's a catch-22 for Dow, because the attention's been drawn to the issue. Now, as like in the public eye, they have brownie points, right? Because they said that they're going to do something about it. And then if they revoke that, they're going to be under huge scrutiny. But if they go through with it, they're going to be losing, what was it, $12 billion?
Yeah.
So they invested in a company which they bought, and now, like, I don't know what actually happened after this, so.
I'm going to tell you. I stopped it on purpose. No. Absolutely. So it's a really awkward position for Dow to be in. What's interesting is that Dow, yes, they care about the public, but they care about another group of people even more than the public. Who would those people be?
Investors.
Yes, investors and shareholders. And what was interesting is in the moments after, and I'll continue playing, but in the moments after this interview aired, and I'll say it in the video, Dow lost, it dropped by something like 3%, which doesn't sound very much, but it was, I believe it was millions of dollars, at least tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. They'll say the exact amount. But so the fact that this action by an artist activist group has an immediate financial repercussion in the global market, and they're not reacting because the market wasn't reacting because Dow is a bad company that doesn't want to help the poor people who have suffered. They're reacting because Dow is helping the poor people who have suffered, and so the Yesen brought out another layer of this, of the corporate self-interest, and their stock price went back up after they did issue their public reaction to this. So I'll just continue the video because it does.
And our shareholders may take a bit of a hit, Steve, but I think that if they're anything like me, they will be ecstatic to be part of such a historic occasion of doing right by those that we've wronged.
Just to reiterate what Jude Finisterra, the spokesman for Dow Chemicals, has just said, he says that Dow Chemicals now fully accept responsibility for the events in Bhopal.
Great. That's it. Great. Now they wanted radio. I can tell you one thing. We're not going out of business. We will continue to make profit. We will simply make slightly less profit than normal. But we are doing the right thing. We're comparing here, though, the value of money to the value of human life, and there is no comparison.
It's a good thing to know.
Exactly. I mean, how often does Dow get to, It wouldn't be, I wouldn't want to be a Dow spokesperson otherwise.
I love this. So I wanted to call your attention to the statements he's making. They make sense. They're kind of really obvious. Of course, the value of human life is more than the value of stock, of profit and shares. And of course, these kind of sound like second nature to us. And the fact that this is a radical statement is, again, it's calling attention to the absurdity of the whole system that rewards a company for ignoring human suffering, for ignoring people who have been hurt by its own actions or the actions of one of its subsidiaries. So, again, now this part will show the...
Good. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm gonna have a serious nervous breakdown now.
Dow accepts responsibility for Bhopal, spokesman.
Where is that?
In Reuters.
Congratulations, your PB appearance. Everyone here at BBC cheered. It's over now and it's still headline news. Hello, this is Jude. Who has said that? Perhaps they're not in communication with the Dow leadership. Hello? Yes, this is Jude Finisterra. Sure. Right. Sure. Right. Let me just, yes, could I ask you to hold for a moment? Okay, thank you. They know. For now, I guess. I just basically come clean, right? Well, I wouldn't say it's a hoax. It's an honest representation of what Dow should be doing.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. Here's just the lovely screenshot. So it goes on. So this video that I'm showing you is taken from a much longer film, which I love to show you in its entirety, but then it would take up the class. It's online. It's freely available. It's called The Yes Men Fix the World. It's available in 11 parts on YouTube, or in one part online, but I think sometimes you need a VPN to get it. So, but you could definitely see it in its entirety on YouTube. So if you're interested in kind of seeing the way they build this entire story, they kind of culminate it with Bhopal, but they talk about a bunch of other projects that they do ahead of that are trying to change corporate culture, or at least trying to draw attention to, again, the absurdities and the contradictions of how corporate, in this case, corporate in the United States, but again, corporate culture in general, responds to human problems. So what's interesting, and this is something that, if I let the video go on, you would have seen this part. What happens with the fallout from this is that Dow Chemical then turns it back on the yes men, and the BBC do as well, because they feel like morons after this. Obviously, interviewing the wrong person. So they kind of turn it back on the yes men, saying, you just gave, he mentions 120,000 people, but the 500,000 who were affected or injured, you just gave those people false hope, is sort of what they accuse the yes men of doing. And that's the last part of this section of the video that I was going to show. But so how do you respond to that? I mean, how do you think that's a valid criticism of the piece and this whole intervention? I mean, is this in fact giving people false hope, or is it more valuable to have this very public media intervention that then kind of undermines the credibility of Dow?
I think that's and but it's also valuable with what they did, because you can use it in multiple situations for learning, like in class, obviously. I'll see this everywhere in other companies, responsibility to that thing.
Usually also, if the company had the means to give back to the people, it just wouldn't do it. Because like, if it was a big company like that, and they have, I would say that high, but at the same time, they are.
So the outcome of it is that they did not, in fact, follow through with the yes men's helpful suggestion that they liquidate Union Carbide and use the proceeds to help in Bhopal. So, in a sense, it was false. But what happens is in the film, Andy and Mike get so unnerved by this that they travel to Bhopal and they meet with the people there, and they gauge their reactions to the whole hoax and the whole stunt. And what happens is the people of Bhopal, apparently most of them thought it was too good to be true anyway, so a lot of people didn't believe it at first when they first heard the news. And then the hoax, again, it came through so quickly that it was in fact a prank or a hoax. But again, so it wasn't this sort of, we gave the entire population false hope and dashed their happiness. that narrative that they tried to use against them. Okay. That narrative really didn't, didn't actually play out that way. So again, you're more than welcome to check out the full video. But this film itself, The Yes Men Fix the World, is, again, it's an open source, kind of like just freely distributed, no copy. They do have DVDs if you want to buy one, but again, the point is to really, put their ideas out in the public, put their projects out there, and that's why they're using Kickstarter to fund their next film, because again, they want it to be from the public. They also have quite a few other projects, and so I'm just going to do two more that they've done. So they create, not only do they stage these media interventions, but they actually create products that are, again, commentaries, absurdist commentaries on aspects of corporate culture. And so this one, the Survivaball, it figures into the first, or to the Yes Men Fix the World, and it's also part of later actions that have been staged regarding the environment. So it plays out as an infomercial. There's no, so this is just a very short kind of infomercial commercial for this product, the Halliburton Survivaball.
As climate change brings forth catastrophic challenges, your very survival hangs in the balance. How will you protect your family and ensure continuity when millions face an uncertain future? In these dark times, it can be hard to see a way out. While others look to Senate bills or UN accords for a solution to global warming, you demand peace of mind now. After many months of research and development, we are pleased to bring you Survivaball. The best engineers from America's biggest corporations have come together for this state-of-the-art solution to global warming. Each Survivaball contains all the tools you need to enjoy a safe and happy stay on our changing planet. Survivaball is a self-powered, self-cooling, self-heating, self-hydrating, total recycling, emergency life-sustaining device designed to protect you and your family from impending future calamities brought on by climate change. Survivaball protects from a myriad of climate-induced dangers: ice age, hurricanes, rising sea levels, droughts, and many more. In a future that brings many potential problems, Survivaball is one simple solution within your reach, ensuring human continuity for generations to come. Survivaball, don't sweat it.
Okay, so here's a diagram of the Survivaball Model X7. And what's key in this was the idea of the self, the individual. This is an every man for himself, or every woman for herself idea. And it's echoing this, kind of, these sort of conservative tendencies to, to say that yeah, I mean, we're all individuals here. This is the kind of Ayn Randian, focus on yourself, focus exactly on what you can do, the money that you can earn, and you will survive by yourself in your Survivaball. This is not a shared, this is not a shared or communal solution to the problem. This is, they priced it at something like $150,000 each. Or you can actually get one for if you donate $10,000 to their movie on Kickstarter, they will send you a Survivaball. I mean, it doesn't actually have all those functions. It's just the big costume. But if you want one, you can actually get one for $10,000. But the idea is that it would be priced so absurdly high that only the fabulously wealthy could really afford, such a means of survival. And the fact that it's ridiculous. Can you imagine these people, these investment bankers or hedge fund managers or whoever they're imagining purchasing the Survivaball, the celebrities, people with all this money? Can you imagine them walking around in Survivaballs? Obviously, they wouldn't be caught dead in these. So again, the aesthetics of the ball, the aesthetics of the ball, the kind of, it renders It renders the person absurd, but also, you know, weirdly cuddly and soft. And you know, there's a lot going on there with just how it, you know, just how it functions as an object. And again, the idea that it's completely self-contained, that repetition of the word self, self-powered, self-contained, self-propelled. It's all about the self. It's all about the individual. In this brave new world we're going to inhabit, it's, again, everyone for him or herself. Here's the website. This is, I took this screenshot the other day. It's still up. And they do demos. They have the survival balls. They're actually, so the survival ball was really kind of a 2002, 2003 project, which has now kind of gotten a new life with the upcoming focus on the environment that they're switching to. And the idea that it's the Halliburton survival ball. So Halliburton is one of these companies that really took a lot of the Iraq contracts for the rebuilding. The rebuilding of Iraq, and it's also the company that my former Vice President Dick Cheney was linked to and profited from his influence in the White House. So the Halliburton, you know, tag attached to that is intended to conjure up all these connections. So this is how, so the survival ball by itself is ridiculous. The survival balls in action are actually like even more so. So this is an actual demonstration that they staged with the survival balls in front of the U.S. Capitol.
How ridiculous is it? How ridiculous is it when we know that there is something that is going to cause people to die in massive numbers and we don't do something about it? In the courts, that's called manslaughter. But if you put a man in one of these, you can save them. Unfortunately, it's just the rich that will be saved. So, we are now about to go to the Capitol. We're going to surround the building, and we are not going to allow any of the Congress or the workers out or in until they come to a binding agreement on climate change. It's come to that, folks. It's come to that. To the step! To the step!
Survivable. We'll make our own.
Thank you. You're not the best person to do it.
I think that's it, yeah. It's about, yeah, because it's the
I'm fine, no matter what comes as a result of climate change. Survival will protect us against anything that might happen.
So yes, the survival balls in action. There's also, again, if you go on YouTube, there's a video of them shortly after this demonstration. I believe they were chasing one of the former senators. His name was Arlen Specter. He's a Republican, but a moderate Republican. So he was one of the swing votes for this bill that they're actively having a demonstration about. And they're chasing him. And they're in their survival ball suits, and they're just like running after him, and a camera crew comes up to them and says, "What are you doing?" And this woman is, "I'm chasing Senator Arlen Specter, and we're going to get him to vote, change his vote." And again, it's the absurdity, and it's also, I mean, if you think of how ineffective it is to maneuver while wearing these ridiculous outfits, it's about the your movement is impeded, and your ability to function. I mean, that poor guy falls down the steps. His survival ball kind of gets popped. That was not on purpose, but the fact that he survived his fall down the steps of the capital really, calls into, it just, calls into effect the purpose of this. So it is about surviving climate change, whether you're, not in these ridiculous suits, but getting the major governments of the world to agree on protocols for reducing carbon emissions, for switching to reducing dependence on oil. Again, a whole set of environmental considerations that again are all encapsulated in the survivable. And again, they call out in the very beginning. They talk about it being manslaughter to kill someone basically without not premeditated, but to allow people to die when you could have done something about it. They're referring very strongly to the idea that that by not doing something about climate change, these governments, especially the United States, are perpetrating manslaughter. But again, it's spoken by a man in a big, giant ball with little appendages coming out of it. So again, survival balls. There's also another project which is in the interventionist catalog, so you can go check it out at the library. It's on reserve there. It's called Management Leisure Suit, and this is a type of kind of corporate pranking that the yes men do, where they do this sort of thing where they create websites that mimic corporate websites, and then again they're at some point invited to a conference or to speak on behalf of that corporation. This one involves the World Trade Organization. They were, I believe this is the one for the World Trade Organization, but I have the video of the entire thing. So this is the presentation that Andy and Mike did about how this management suit is going to revolutionize the way we have remote offices. So he's talking about this idea that you can outsource your labor, and then the manager can say, can do whatever he wants to do. And again, necessarily he, for this project, can do whatever he wants to do, and still can maintain control and surveillance over his workers.
In New York, Hong Kong, or Espoo, Finland, and the workers are in Gabon, Rangoon, or Estonia.
Again,
how does the manager maintain proper rapport with the workers? And how does he or she ensure from a distance that workers perform their work in an ethical fashion? I'm about to show you an actual prototype of the WTO solution to two major management problems of today. Now, we all know that not even the best workplace design can help even the most astute manager keep track of workers. What you need is a solution that enables complete rapport with workers, especially when they're located far away. Mike, would you help me a moment? Thank you. This is much better, much more comfortable. This is the WTO's answer to two of the major management problems, and we're calling it the Management Leisure Suit. It's the two problems again: how to maintain close rapport with distant workers, and how to remain comfortable and increase leisure activities. How does the Management Leisure Suit work, besides being extremely comfortable, as I can guarantee you? Well, allow me to describe the suit's core features. This is the EVA, the Employee Visualization Appendage. It's an instantly deployable hip-mounted device with totally hands-free operation that allows the manager to see his employees directly right here. Signals communicating the exact amounts and quality of physical work
are transmitted not only visually right here, but directly through electric channels implanted directly into the manager. The workers, for their part, are fitted with corresponding transmitting chips that are implanted humanely directly into the shoulder. But the other equally important achievement of the MLS has to do with leisure. In the United States, leisure, another word for freedom really, has been decreasing steadily since the 1970s. The management leisure suit permits the manager to reverse this trend by letting him do his work anywhere while remaining in complete touch with the workers, physically sensing what's going on in the workforce on the floor through channels implanted directly into the manager. Again, the manager sees the employees, but also feels what they're feeling and can select where to focus in the workplace environment. So, in conclusion, I'd like to ask, is this a science fiction scenario? The answer is no. Everything we've seen here, everything we've been talking about is entirely possible today. We can always look forward on the highways of progress towards ever new horizons with cooperation and mutual delight in the fruits of prosperity. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Alright, so did you see the audience in this video? I was hoping you'd pay attention to that. They're taking notes. They don't get that this is a joke, but they understand. They laugh. It's funny, but they don't understand the satire. They don't understand the absurdity of it all and what it's actually trying to say. And later on, the yes men do say that they believe this was a failure because the audience actually asked them practical questions about it later, and actually was more engaged with the idea that this could be a real product than actually understanding that it's meant again to kind of critique the management style of these corporations that have headquarters in wealthy urban centers and manufacturing plants, workers in poorer areas. Obviously the imagery, the symbolism is really obvious here. This is not a subtle piece at all. But again, they were not particularly thrilled with the way this works, but it kind of shows their strategy. And then they did bring this suit and the video documentation to the interventionist exhibition that we talked about in week 2. So again, this is, and the fact that it's wearable, the fact that it's again with the body, it's connected to the body, an extension of the body, much like the survivor balls. But again, where the survivor balls are cute and cuddly, the management leisure suit is vaguely pornographic, and it's again, it's supposed to make you uncomfortable as you're watching this guy give his talk. So that's the yes men. It's a strategy that they have a lot of other avenues that they kind of go down. They have fake newspapers that they'll print and they'll distribute. Fairly recently, they did an issue of, I believe it was the New York Post, where they just had a big sign saying "We're screwed," and it was about the environment, and they were giving out copies on the street, and people were picking them up and reading them, and not really caring that. It was the problem was that real life was already so hyperbolic that saying on the cover of the New York Post "We're all screwed," that's probably something that would go on the cover. So no one really actually understood it was a fake New York Post. They also created a fake New York Times, and they distributed that on the streets of New York, in which it had, they imagined that if every humane or environmentally friendly law were passed, what the world would look like. And they created articles. They wrote articles. They created photographs, an entire New York Times of the world after all these humane laws were passed. And it was just this happy, sunny, very positive, it's a fixed world. The world has been fixed by the yes men. And they distributed that on the streets. And people were a little more aware that that was fake as they were reading through it. It's like, we didn't fix global warming, we didn't, take out lobbyists in the government, that sort of thing. So, again, different strategies, but again, always engaging with the media, always engaging with those forms of representation. So there's different strategies strategies for tactical media. I want to show you a couple of projects by a group called the Center for Tactical Magic. This is a collective. There's quite a few members. But what they do is they do research and development and in deployment of a system that they refer to as tactical magic. So this is not necessarily tactical media in the sense that they're engaging the way media systems are, are in representation, are distributed. But this is more a combination of artist, magician, ninja, and private investigator is the way they describe it. But the avenues for the distribution of their work do echo those of kind of viral, viral projects that even the Yes Men and their getting videos or images that will go viral, that will spread online. So, for example, they have, this is actually ongoing, you can do this. It's a bank heist contest that they sponsor. And you create a bank robbery. You don't actually rob a bank. They're not telling you to go out and rob one. But they're trying to get people to design the perfect bank robbery. I'll quote from their site. By bank heist, they mean the act of unlawfully seizing cash or other assets located in or traveling to or from a financial institution. Robbery, burglary, larceny, theft, embezzlement, fraud, and con artistry may all be considered variations of heists. And then so they say that in today's socioeconomic climate, do people really need encouragement to rob a bank? The bank heist contest really provides a creative and rewarding outlet without the risk of jail time. So again, emphasizing that not everyone's thrilled with banks. Banks have become this kind of the villain in the recent global financial crisis, and the idea that you can spend your free time coming up with ways to rob them, coming up with ways to kind of pull it off, and then you get again, you can participate in the contest. You might win, get $1,000 for your trouble. If you actually pulled off the perfect robbery, you get a whole lot more. But again, there's no risk if you just participate in the contest. So that's actually ongoing. Another project. This was right around the. This was right before the second U.S. Invasion of Iraq. So right before 2003, I want to say. Was Bechtel Enterprises was a company that was awarded one of the Iraq reconstruction contracts. So this is even before the war happened. Bechtel Enterprises bid and they got the rights to reconstruct the country that was about to be destroyed. And they're responsible for building chemical production facilities in Iraq even before so these chemical production facilities that were kind of, there was chemical warfare and genocide and things like that going on. So it was kind of one of the inspirations for invading Iraq, according to the people who do these things. But again, the people who built those were actually, again, a U.S.-based company. So this piece brought attention to the fact that this company is basically playing both sides, benefiting, profiting from war, and is just getting rewarded for that. So what they did was they created these predator drones. So this is and they're not very fearsome. This is a Bechtel predator drone here. And basically remote controlled little vehicles that would go around corporate headquarters and pass out leaflets and information about, again, exposing all these connections and the war profiteering of this company. Another project that the Center for Tactical Media is fairly well known for are these ideas of witches' cradles. So again, this idea of magic, witchcraft, relating that to technology today. Think about, again, what we can do even with our phones. This is the witchcraft of today. They have, so they're taking it back to an earlier idea of what is a witch? What is a witch's cradle? So this is a transporter vehicle, a social witch's cradle, which they staged. And it's resembling an old medieval torture device that used to be known as a witch's cradle, in which the accused would be placed in a sack and hung from a tree. And it was supposed to induce visions and hallucinations that were supposed to be punishment. So again, people, the reason the Volkswagen is sort of a psychedelic Volkswagen witch bus, it was again, so it was suspended from a crane, and you're supposed to enter it and have your psychedelic, experience within the bus. So again, kind of fusing, the I don't know what decade, or what century, like, the idea of a 15th or 16th century witch or 17th century witch hunt with the attitude towards drugs and psychedelic substances that goes on, and also again emphasizing the political environment of torture, the idea that that these elaborate constructions have been created to torture enemies to get information out of them in such a way. So there's a lot of very weird projects that they have. So the leader of the group, a man named Aaron Yak, he created another project called Island of Light, Island of Illusion. And so this is, again, it's a fantasy island that is both kind of a secret utopia, a secret lair, kind of a Bond villain-esque island. Again, it appears on these maps or on digitally. Again, it's digitally inserted into these maps that they create. So it's this whirlpool magic island just below the surface of the sea, and it actually can it represents it represents several different levels of philosophy, magic, and the occult. So again, kind of trying to bring back this idea of witchcraft and the occult into today's society, and because we're kind of immune to that nowadays. So another project, this is by an artist called Jill Maggot, and I like this project a lot. It's a very simple piece, but what she does is she calls attention to the constant surveillance that different cities, especially, think of urban areas, think of how many security cameras you're found on, especially in a city like London, or here, this is actually in Amsterdam. People can be tracked, their movements can be tracked throughout the city quite easily using security cameras. And so Jill Maggot actually created a company called System Azure Security Ornamentation in 2003. And she got the permits and created a proposal to beautify the police security cameras. So to install shiny, blingy attachments to them that would not only beautify these ugly objects, but actually call attention to them. So it's the idea that if you know that you're being surveilled, at least you have some level of information, whereas most of the time the surveillance is so hidden or it's kind of not in your field of vision. So it's trying to shift the balance of power to the people walking through the city. That you can see these blingy cameras, they catch your attention in such a way that that you are then aware of the actions of the state, the actions of the police. And again, it kind of undoes even the purpose of having a security or a surveillance camera. Another collective, this one is coming out of the Czech Republic. They're called Zdokoven, which has a couple of meanings. There's the kind of meaning that they like to give to. So one of them is kind of like get over it. That's kind of the slang. And another one actually is 100 shits. Like I give 100 shits about this. That's kind of the slang in Czech for this. So what they did was they created a project called, they had several projects, but their most famous one, the one they're actually actively still in trouble for, is one called Media Reality. This was kind of their version of War of the Worlds. And so what they did was they created this video that made it appear as if these are some mountains in the Czech Republic, the Krkonoše Mountains. And what they did was on the Czech Weather Channel, they managed to kind of insert this video into the video feed that made it look as if there was this eerie explosion that kind of this strange explosion that looks really malicious. It shows up on the on the Weather Channel, and the series of images see the different frames. There's this really bright explosion, and then you see this cloud, and it's not like a traditional mushroom cloud, but it's a very frightening image, especially if you don't know what's going on with it. And you're watching the Weather Channel, you're not expecting to see this. You don't know it's an art project. So this project really angered people, and they actually created a whole video that came along with it that showed them pulling off the explosion, and then videotaping it, and then how they inserted it into the live footage. But this obviously angered people, and of course, especially again, in much the same way that when the original War of the Worlds play was aired on radio, people thought that Martians were actually invading us. This actually made people think that there was some kind of attack going on in the mountains of their country. So it brings violence, and the specter of violence that you think of around the world, it brings it closer to home. Again, these are people living peacefully in the Czech Republic. They really haven't had much conflict there since the fall of the Iron Curtain. So again, people are they're complacent. They're placated by their security within, especially now the European Union. These are not people who are used to seeing images like this on their TV. Compare that to people in, say, the Middle East, Lebanon, Israel, the Palestinian territory, where if they have TV connection right now, obviously they're seeing images far worse than this one. So the collective really tried to, and that was one goal of this piece. Another was, again, the media sensibility of it. The idea that we trust the images we see on the media, especially something like the Weather Channel. Who's going to think that the Weather Channel is lying to them? Who's going to think that the video you see as you're, again, trying to get your daily forecast is actually manipulated? So again, exploiting that trust and that faith that people have in the media, even today. And again, it's significant that it was, say, the Weather Channel and not some opinion news. I can't imagine people believing everything they hear on an opinion program unless they're very biased toward one side or the other. But again, towards something that we feel is objective and that we are used to reading in that way. So again, challenging the population, but also again creating these connections to images of violence that we see around the world. The collective also, another thing they've gotten in trouble for as well, creating these modified traffic lights. So these are put up around the city of Prague in the Czech Republic. And they actually, instead of the little pedestrian walking or stopping, so this one is drinking, and this one here is hanging himself. You can go through all these. This one is defecating on the sidewalk. There's quite a lot going on in these little images, and most people wouldn't notice this. How many of you actually really look at the outline of the pedestrian as you're crossing? Maybe not, but you might notice something is off. You might take a second look. Again, it's about altering the way we see things and our perceptions. This isn't really as much of a media project, but I like to include it because it's, again, that same kind of idea about we trust the images we see. We trust the signals we receive. We're so used to it that we don't really question what we see. So again, and these were also about social issues, about urban issues. The problem of drinking is huge. All over the world, the drinking to excess is kind of it's a source of pride in sort of the Czech character. This idea that you can drink, you can never get drunk. So again, calling attention to these to some of these not so great, I guess, aspects of the national character, or things that they've previously taken pride in. So there's a whole other level to this that you don't really get so much art, in fact, to check. But again, it's very targeted toward that audience. Another group, again, there's a lot of collectives in this lecture. It's very interesting about the personal information that is encoded in the objects that we carry around with us every day. So if you think about your OHIP card, your driver's license, license, your credit cards, debit cards. All of those little magnetic stripes have much more information than you think they do. So for this project, they called Swipe. They set up a bar, and when you went to, you had to show your driver's license, and if you swiped your credit card, the bar, the collective members who were running the bar would actually tell you the information that they could see about you based on what they swiped. So it was a way to kind of educate the public about, again, how much of our information is really freely available. I mean, if we think about that, I mean, this was 2002, 2005, but if you imagine today, I mean, how many of you have a Facebook or a Twitter or anything, like that? And when you go on the job market, potential employers will Google you. Potential employers will find ways to get into your Facebook. People who are trying to get passwords actually can generate not the passwords, but they can generate the answers to people's security questions based on the information contained in their Facebook profiles. Think how many times, are you friends with your mother online? Does your mother have her maiden name freely available? I mean, things like that we don't think about. We don't really think about how much information is available online. The collective also, again, along the same lines, created a very easy, supposedly easy, I don't make it myself, but you can make your own RFID detector. So that, the RFID chips that people can remotely read your information. If you have a card that's encoded, a lot of our phones now have RFID chips. I have one of those Nexus cards, and it comes in a gold envelope because they don't want people to be able to read the information on it. So you have to keep it in the gold foil envelope all the time. Or someone with an RFID device could actually find out all their personal information. So this is a detector. So this is kind of the same idea as people who have the radar detectors on their cars. Here's an RFID detector. So you can actually make one at home. Supposedly, again, there's detailed instructions, and it's called ZAPT. You make one at home, and then you can actually scan and see if there's any around you. So again, being aware of, again, personal information, identity theft. All of these ideas, again, they're quite concerned with. The Media Collective also has other projects that don't deal with personal information and identity. This one is about air quality measurement. So again, this is the kind of do-it-yourself instructions on how to make a portable air quality monitor. And they distributed them to people in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and different neighborhoods around New York City, so that people could measure the quality of the air and again, the quality of their environment. There was a public workshop that took place in June of 2006, and then there was the full project launched in September after that. So people are supposed to, again, use the device to measure the levels of fossil fuel and other chemicals in their local neighborhood air. So realizing not just what it is you're breathing, but the pollutants caused by the cars, the buildings, the emissions. We talked last week briefly about that Bank of America building that acts as a giant air filter for Manhattan. Obviously, one building is not going to make that much, even a huge building like that does not make that much of a difference in such a densely populated city. So again, making people aware of their surroundings, again, through technology, and using the internet to distribute the means to create these devices, to use them yourself. So again, do-it-yourself kind of aesthetic, but with fairly sophisticated technology. A different tactic, which I'm quite impressed with, is this piece called Oil Standard. This is a Firefox plugin. You can go onto Firefox and download this today if you want. What it does is it shows the entire, everything that you see on a shopping website, all prices display, no longer in dollars or dollars or pounds or whatever it is. They display in barrels of oil. So the way it looks is, so for example, like this is a screenshot of what it would look like if you were doing it. So here's an iPod Nano. It costs 3.85 barrels of oil. So again, and here's like someone, this isn't my bank, this is just the screenshot they provided, but a Chase bank account, so an automated payment, half a barrel of oil. The balance, 25.2 barrels of oil. So again, trying to get people to think outside themselves into the larger system, the fact that they are consumers in a much larger network. And it's all tied. So if you're concerned about something like oil, even banking, even purchasing consumer goods still has an effect. You're never outside that system. That again, if this is something that you are concerned with, if this is one of your personal pet projects, you're never outside that system, and it keeps that awareness going. Finally, 2 more projects by a collective called ubermorgan.com. And a lot of these collectives, again, they have a lot of changing rosters, or they themselves are anonymous members, so I'm just giving you the names of the collectives now. But this one is a project called Google Will Eat Itself. And it's a little complex, so I'll describe it using their terms. So they generate money by serving Google text advertisements on a network of hidden websites. So they host the advertisements for Google, and then they generate money from these advertisements. And with the money, it's set up to automatically buy shares of Google. So they buy Google through Google's own ads, and Google eats itself. But in the end, they own Google. So they call this an auto-cannibalistic model that deconstructs global advertisement mechanisms. So again, it's also exposing kind of the structure of how these companies make money. I mean, think of the clicks. Google is a multi-billion-dollar company because of people clicking on advertisements. They don't make money from their other products. They make money because you click. So ubermorgan.com again they want to hand over the common ownership of their Google shares to a company that they've created called Google to the People Public Company, which would then distribute the shares back to the users. So this is kind of a very roundabout way in trying to make Google a publicly held, like a completely publicly owned company, as opposed to, it's a publicly held company, it's publicly traded, but taking the power, because you can't afford Google. I mean, I tried, you can't afford Google shares, and you definitely can't afford enough to have a controlling share in Google ever. But in this idea, if this were to go on long enough, again, it's not really practical, but taken to its absurd sort of extreme, if this process went on long enough, then ubermorgan.com would eventually own Google and then distribute it back to the users who would then own Google and control the company. A similar large online presence that they've kind of also attacked is Amazon.com. So this project called Amazon Noir, Big Book Crime from 2006. So they're exploiting this element of the Amazon.com website, where if you search for any phrase in any of the books the site offers for sale, you will get a short 50-word quotation from the book. And so what they did was they created a program, an algorithm, to copy the last sentence of that quote and then search for it and get the next 50 words and so forth until they were generating entire books. So this is a way to kind of bootleg copies of books that are for sale on Amazon, taking advantage of the fact that Amazon does provide these little snippets. And they provide it in the hope that you will buy the book. But again, ubermorgan.com wants it to be for the public. This is about open access, freedom for the consumer, for the user. So again, this idea that you could eventually, like in a matter of moments, reconstruct entire books. Is it intellectual theft? I mean, is this the same thing as like pirating? I mean, probably. I mean, it is if they're making money off of it. It is anyway. It is intellectual copyright theft. It's not legal to, copy an entire book and distribute it online without the permission. But again, it's challenging this idea that we have permission and intellectual copyrights when, again, it's knowledge, it's information that is for sale, that is being copyrighted. So, I mean, you can have you can be ambivalent about it. I mean, I am ambivalent about this as someone who writes for a living, as someone who creates, generates ideas. I'm not making money off of it, but there is something to be said for proper, as I said, don't ever plagiarize. Attribute things to the proper sources. And projects like this, the Google Document Project, for example, that really get text out into the open, they're great for the distribution of knowledge, but again, also lead to a huge proliferation of plagiarism and attributing things incorrectly. So it cuts both ways. But again, it's an interesting project. It's an interesting way to look at how the internet and these again, large internet corporations that exist, that have existed solely on the internet. I mean, these never had a component in the physical world. And Google has the phones and stuff now, but that's still, again, it's all to sell. It's all to sell ad space. And for Amazon, again, it's all kind of virtual and it's all pervasive. So really trying to consider what this means, that we have, again, these massive companies that are not tangible, not visible, and how we can manipulate these companies for our own ends. So that's kind of all the tactical media I'm going to give you for today. But I'm curious to see, so think about the course and what we've talked about since the very beginning. I'm curious, I want to know what you think about art and activism, the kind of role that art and artists can play in regards to activism. Like where is the utility of activist art? What projects, we can start there, what projects have struck you as something that was maybe worthwhile or effective, or something that could have made a tangible difference?
Going off what we saw earlier in class, the yes men with the big companies, is that again?
Dow Chemical.
Dow, yeah. That had the possibility for having huge effects, but it didn't. But I think that was worthwhile for sure.
So go further. So yeah, so it had a possibility for huge effects. Did it still have an effect? I mean, do you think it's completely negated because the company didn't? And this isn't just for you. I mean, anyone can answer this.
I think it had an effect because we're talking about it.
Okay.
It created a discussion, and that in itself is important.
That's true. It's, creating a discussion, getting people to talk about issues, absolutely. But does that talk then, how can it translate into action? Because we can talk about it in class, but does that do anything for the people involved? I mean, or does it have potential to?
Well, I guess it raises awareness.
Okay. I mean, had any of you, so you had heard of Bhopal before this, but some of you had, some of you hadn't, right? And even before I had heard of the S-Men, I didn't know about the Bhopal disaster. I mean, I think I heard the word before, but I didn't really know what it was. So I do credit the Yes-Men with really bringing this to a larger audience, and the fact that they're doing it humorously is a real strategy for for getting people to talk about the issue. I think they did it very kind of preachingly. I don't think it would have had the same.
Could it be effective in a way that there's the idea of educating the population and the younger population about the issues might be able to prevent something like this happening again, or even scare companies away from using douchebags because they don't want this to happen to them in the future?
Well, that's one way to do it, and talking about it, getting people aware of it is one thing. Getting people not to buy down products, getting people not to actually boycott, because what the Yes Men Project really did is illustrate that the priority of the company is 100% to its shareholders and its bottom line. Not every company in the world is like this, but a lot of them. I mean, Dow is not unique. There are quite many companies, pretty much any major company you name is going to prefer that its stock price stay up.
The only way to really implement change is to create policy. So from this, policy has to be made to enforce the ideas of like what they're doing. So you can talk about it and you can make people aware of it, but somebody has to step forward and write a policy and push it in order for something to be done about it.
No, absolutely. So yeah, this idea, we get back to thinking about the issues we did in week 3 about democracy and art and how these activist products try to stimulate, or activist projects try to stimulate the processes of democracy. So absolutely. In a case like the Bhopal one, there are policies in place in the United States, and that's the country that Dow Chemical is most, they're under the U.S. control technically. But because of the international aspect, and I didn't get into that because it would have probably bored you all to tears, but there was a legal battle in India, but the fact that even though, again, the United States has laws about corporate abuse and corporate restitutions for victims, and India had a judgment against Union Carbide because there was a loophole in which Dow just found that loophole, and they ended up not being able, not having to be beholden to either of the two national policies about, about corporate malfeasance, for example. So they're absolutely, like, policy is helpful, and getting, again, educating the population, getting the processes of democracy underway. The survival balls on the Capitol steps, I mean, that's democracy. They're agitating about a bill. It's at its very core, we're trying to affect the processes of climate change using democracy and democratic strategies. So yeah, absolutely. So let's think about, so any other projects stand out to you that seemed either particularly effective or had a real world impact? Yeah.
The projects that use the government funding or any funding that they receive but to create actual change, like they actually use the money to make change and then do an artwork as kind of a side, just to fill in, so we actually made art. I think there was one about building infrastructure.
Yeah, that one was on the U.S.-Mexico, well, it was outside of Tijuana. Yeah, they were building the infrastructure in this settlement, and they used the government and the art world funding to do so.
Also, like turning tax.
Yes. And that was another border project. Yeah, that's a real strategy on the border. This idea that, yeah, you see actual dollars, or in the case of Mexico, pesos, going to, going to change, and again, exploiting the funding channels. It's a real strategy that is effective. It makes people angry, so that also generates a conversation. Even the first project I showed you today, the Trans-Border Immigrant Tool, again, that was funded with public funds. That's the project out of UC San Diego, public institution. So again, it upset people because it was taxpayer dollars, and it gets people talking, and it also, again, generates an actual change. So what then? Anyone else want to add? Like, what strategies strike you as effective, or on the converse, what strategies strike you as particularly ineffective, or maybe missed the mark? Did you have enough information now to kind of think evaluatively about this? Oh, I see lots of hands. Okay, we'll start.
Going back to the X-Men, I think that they're particularly effective because they push the bill as far as they can, and they take risks, legal risks, and I think that's the way to go, is to take risks and not necessarily take safe.
Okay, so on the boundaries of legality, you see that being particularly effective. Yeah. So other hands, yeah.
I was going to say that I think the works that use the public spectacle to me would seem the most effective, like opposed to maybe music pieces, like the one where you're driving around on a bike around. That didn't seem that effective to me, but that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, and also the intention of that piece was a little different. I mean, it was more after the fact, kind of celebrating and returning the island. So it's more symbolic, but absolutely it was not creating a change from that piece. So you can definitely see there's a lot of variation.
I was just gonna say with Comey, I thought that it was effective but also ineffective at the same time. Like it was effective because probably a lot of us have never even heard of there's a Comey before that project was released. But then through how we looked at like the video was formatted and how it played on our sensibilities and stuff like that, I think it made it was effective towards a greater audience, but I think if you looked at it critically, it was ineffective, especially at the end where they say, please donate this and you'll get a package. Like, when I watched it the first time, I was like, okay, like, I'm not averse to donating money, but I'm like, this group is automatically asking for money to send a package with bracelets. Like, it was just, I don't know, it was effective because it, like, it was spread throughout the media so quickly, but it was also ineffective just by how they presented it. And then even afterwards, the man who created it, I forget his name, yeah, he ended up having like, or something, or in the media everywhere it was like, oh, he was drunk, he was out, like, he was
standing on a
streaking,
street corner
like,
naked, just hanging
so he used like, the Coney 12 video used social media to spread it, but then it backfired on the guy who actually made the video because whether this stuff was true or not, everybody then knew about this guy's indiscretions, then that kind of affected the video and people wanting to then be part of the 2012.
Yeah, because again, he put himself into that video, his status, not just as a filmmaker, but as a father, and really associated with him. Yeah, if he hadn't made the video so personally connected to himself, it probably would not have had the same effect if it had been sort of an anonymous narrator or something. Absolutely, that's a really good point. And the fact that social media and making art projects or videos or any kind of visual material go viral takes it out of the creator's control. Once it's out there, anything can happen, and the desired effect might not actually.
I was wondering about the power side. I'm not sure how effective that is. The homeless shelter.
Oh, the parasite, yes.
Because it's not really useful. Like it can't really live in that, right? And
it doesn't give the homeless person a home. I mean, which would ultimately be the goal, to give the person a shelter, an actual shelter.
And as far as it sends a message, I mean, I don't think it's going to stay up very long anyway for it to send a message to many people. Like it's still interesting. I still like it because it does bring attention to the issue of homelessness and the shopping cart and everything that as well. But what really does it do?
It doesn't affect policy in any way. To bring it back to that, it's not agitating for more social welfare reform in that way. Yeah, it doesn't function on that level. Now, whether or not, and this is interesting because when we call out something as being effective or ineffective, exactly, we have to take into account not only the goals of the piece, but the larger issue and what's happened in the wake of the piece. And measuring the effectiveness of art is something that's why I was curious to see what you all think of it, because it's not something that we as art historians or artists or really, there's no real metric for measuring, the impact of an art. I mean, people can do it through, say, looking at tweets or social media or something. I mean, there are now ways that people are trying to devise to look at the impact of not just visual material, but anything really in our online society. But it really doesn't take into account a huge percentage of the population. Not everybody is in there tweeting online every 5 minutes. I mean, it really ignores a large percentage of people. It is a way to kind of see what the people online are talking about, but really those kind of metrics don't provide any kind of real coherent numbers or argument for or against a particular strategy. So that is really one of the challenges of studying art and activism, and I hope that's been clear to you from the start of this course, is that there's no real way to measure it, unless the piece is literally something that we were talking about with Claudio Rojas and creating an infrastructure in a town. Okay, yes, the piece used money to create an infrastructure in the town, and that's why I like that you did call those pieces out, because there's a very real effect. There's a very real benefit that we can point to and say, the artist did this, the art piece did this. Then that brings up another question. question. What is the role of art in all of this? A lot of these projects, and again, I mean, we're not going to have the debate over what is art, what isn't art, because that doesn't need to be had here, but the art and the lines of art and activism are blurred, and not everything I showed you was quote-unquote art. I mean, a lot of the viral images and such things like that I wouldn't call as art. But a lot of these projects that I've showed you, especially in the last half of the course, I've really devoted it to art by artists who are calling it art, that it's labeled as such. But for example, say the plug-in with barrels of oil that you can put on Firefox. I mean, how does that register as art? Or how, similar projects like that. It's not readily apparent to the public that it is an art project unless they read the material about it. So thinking about it in terms of art and activism, not just visual culture, but art in general, okay? How do we then interpret, how do we judge the piece, not just by effectiveness, but then how do we look at these pieces of art? Has anything struck you as particularly well executed in that way? Has anything struck you as, for my example would be actually the same one that you pointed out, the one about the trumpet. I think it's very well executed as an art piece. It's not as activist, it doesn't have the goal of being an activist piece or having a real concrete effect. So that's one example, but think about it, I don't know, where do we see the art? As artists, many of you are artists yourselves.
The handshake project by Phillips, is that how you say the last name?
Sorry, what?
It was one of the readings where the handshake project.
Oh, touch sanitation.
Yeah,
Touch sanitation, yes, it says eucalyptus.
Yeah. It's hard to define what exactly about it is art because she's going out there and actually shaking people's hands, talking to all the sanitation workers. But I think the way she did it, how she actually planned out her path so she could actually meet and interact with each and one of them, that's a lot of effort, right? To be able to actually not just go out and meet a couple, but actually all of them. And I don't know, I think those projects that work at the local level and acknowledge, I think, parts of our everyday life that not everyone else does, or we overlook, I guess. I think those are the most effective because just the fact that, you made someone's day, I guess, kind of thing is, I guess,
Yeah, absolutely. And then, on the surface, it does not look like art. I mean, it's performance art, and she's using her own body to create it. So that's where the art does come into that. But yeah, I like that about the individual and the local, and it's maybe not as quantifiable, but you can, have some kind of impact or some kind of change in an individual's life. So, well, I'm going to let you go. If again.